Halifax area, and got to try your fair share of burgers. It's one of my favorite times of the year. It's one of my favorite sort of food events as it stands. We're looking down at we got Rib Fest coming up in the summer, so I'll be looking forward to that. Hopefully, I'll be able to get out for some of that action down on the waterfront. It's usually just an excuse to drink beer and eat some pork, which I'm looking forward to. I'm always looking forward to an opportunity to drink beer in the hot sun and eat some pork products, which delicious. So anyhow, that's enough about food, I guess. We're going to move on to the normal, as it seems. I promise, after WrestleMania season is over, we're going to go back to just covering wrestling when it's appropriate, I guess. Basically right now, like I said, it's WrestleMania season. This is our administrative assistants appreciation week. It's the biggest week of the year, so just relax. Calm down. We'll get through it together. I got some interesting points here to raise. I'm going to go over the card to WrestleMania. But first, I'm going to talk about some of the events that are going on around WrestleMania and some of the ridiculousness that still pervades the fake sport that we all know and love. So, not just WrestleMania to look forward to this coming week, as the WWE sort of invades everything in the greater New Orleans, Louisiana area. Along with it comes usually a bunch of other wrestling events that sort of surround the professional wrestling scene around it. It's the biggest wrestling weekend of the year. So a bunch of other independent wrestling promotions will do their best to run shows in and around WrestleMania week because there's going to be a lot of wrestling fans there. It's just sort of a thing that they do every single year. So there's usually a major convention where former wrestlers or wrestlers on the independent scene get out and meet with fans, kind of in a sort of a Comic-Con type of scenario. Which is called WrestleCon. There's also usually some wrestling shows that go in and around that event. I believe Impact Wrestling, the former TNA, and Lucha Underground are actually running a co-branded show at that event. So that'll be interesting to see what comes of that. In addition, Ring of Honor always runs a pretty big card on WrestleMania weekend. Usually, I believe, right up against NXT, which is WWE's sort of lower card feeder system, almost their in-house development brand. Will run one of their bigger shows of the year, Takeover, which looks like a good card. I'll be trying to catch that as I can. Of course, I'm going to be in Prince Edward Island at the time and be in Charlottetown, so I'm not going to be able to necessarily watch it live. But nonetheless, it's a big week for professional wrestling across the board. And here's something that I'm just going to say off the top, and I'm apologies to Dave Schwartz about this one. Professional wrestling is fake. It's predetermined. It's a work. It is kayfabed. It's not real. It's not a true fight in the way that mixed martial arts UFC is. Okay, I know that. You know that. We all know that. It's a show. And that doesn't make it any worse to my mind. In fact, I always say that I like my violence to be scripted. I don't watch a whole lot of UFC. I don't watch a whole lot of boxing. I'll watch if there's a major fight that I absolutely want to see. Like when CM Punk steps back into the octagon in Chicago against whomever it may be. I'll be watching that fight. I watched the major fights between Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. I watched Mayweather versus Conor McGregor. I'll watch it when it is something that's interesting to me, but I'm not buying every UFC event. I'm not on the edge of my seat for every boxing match. It's just not the way that I enjoy things. I prefer my my violence to be scripted. I like to suspend my disbelief, and I like to watch something where I know that unless something goes wrong, the guys are relatively speaking okay at the end, and they're able to grab a beer together after the show. WrestleMania was in New Orleans about 4 years ago, and fans who were watching some of the independent events got some interesting news from the different independent cards, and they're getting the same sort of news this year. Announcers mentioned that pile drivers, as well as bloodshed, was banned by the Louisiana Boxing and Wrestling Commission, and such that they would not be allowed to have bloodshed in wrestling matches or the use of the pile driver. So you probably have a pretty good idea of what the pile driver is, but it's sort of like the move where a guy is lifted upside down and then his head is driven into the mat by his opponent, usually between his legs or between his knees if it was sort of in a kneeling position. It looks really, really gruesome, and it's treated as being a really important move and a really devastating finishing move. Of course, the Undertaker's famous tombstone pile driver, which is that kneeling variety, is sort of the way that it's sort of one of those moves that just defies any possibility of being kicked out of. The number of guys who actually kick out of the tombstone is pretty limited. The standard sort of stump puller, almost pile driver style, made famous by the likes of Jerry Lawler, Terry Funk. Again, used very sparingly and used as a very devastating, almost, this is definitely the finish to the match type of move. But both those and blood is banned in Louisiana, so apparently you won't be seeing those sorts of moves being used if you happen to go to one of those events in New Orleans during WrestleMania week, which is fucking ludicrous, by the way. Like that's sort of the point that I'm going to make. Why are boxing wrestling commissions still overseeing professional wrestling? It doesn't make any sense to me. You don't have a boxing and wrestling commission looking over, like if they were to shoot a Rocky film, if they were to shoot Creed 2, which by the way I really loved Creed 1, but if they were to shoot Creed 2 in Louisiana, would they be subject to the same sort of rules and regulations for the big fight scenes towards the end of the movie? I don't think so. It's weird to me that just because it's sort of a live event that has an element of trying to portray as being real, that for some reason that they're held to the same standards as if they were an actual athletic competition along the lines of a boxing or a mixed martial arts type of match. Doesn't make any sense to me. This was sort of famously what Vince McMahon did when he started calling professional wrestling. He started calling what the WWF at the time was doing sports entertainment. He stopped calling it professional wrestling. He kind of lifted the curtain and kind of broke kayfabe, and that was sort of the day that kayfabe, or pretending that it was real, kind of died. Was the day that he said, this isn't a legitimate athletic competition; it is entertainment. So don't charge us these extra fees and stuff. And that's just what it ends up being. It's just a chance for these athletic commissions to make some money, charging fees to the individual promoters, making it more difficult for them to promote their matches. I'm not saying that potentially dangerous moves shouldn't be checked at the door. What I am saying though is that pretending that having one person being injured in the past by something that went wrong, it was a move that went wrong, and it was a pile driver type situation, as I understand it. Causing other people to not be able to do that move as a result, it just is silly to me. I wouldn't say out and out that they should flaunt these rules and just go against them. What I am saying is that the boxing and wrestling regulations shouldn't apply to professional wrestling, because it's they don't apply to plays, right? Like it should. End of the day, it should just be like there should be fire codes, fire marshals involved, but not boxing and wrestling commissions. It's just silly. And honestly, I think probably for the people who are hardcore amateur wrestling fans and hardcore MMA fans and boxing fans, are probably pretty insulted that they're being held to the same standards that their standards are being held to professional wrestling. It just doesn't make any sense. Like it's a showcase. It's an exhibition. It is a show, kids. It's fake. It's staged. It's scripted. Yes, these guys do put their bodies on the line, and they are trusting each other with the bodies. But if everything goes right, if everything goes according to plan, the worse that people are is a little bit sore the next day from the physical activity. Of course, not everything does go the right way. Not everything does go according to plan every single time. But that doesn't mean that you can regulate, or you should regulate, everything that these guys do in terms of what they do between the ropes, because it is fake. Done right, a pile driver actually completely protects the individual taking the move, and the person who actually feels any impact is the guy who's giving the move, because his tailbone is the one, or his knees is the one actually making contact with the mat. If you take a look at a pile driver done right, the head never actually touches the mat. So it's just one of those silly things, silly holdovers from way back when. You look, I remember watching the Wrestling Road Diaries, which is Colt Cabana, who's a professional wrestler. He's an independent pro wrestler. Had a cup of coffee in the WWE, but not very long. He put out a documentary that starred himself, the soon to be Daniel Bryan Danielson, and Sal Rinauro, touring around the country a little bit. It was up in the northeast of the United States, going town to town and doing some seminars, doing some matches, doing some shows, and all that sort of stuff. And there was one little extra on the DVD where Colt Cabana had to get a wrestling license, and I believe it was Maryland. It's just like he had to get a license to do something that is just like, it's just fake. It's not like he had to, there's no like actual test for becoming a professional wrestler, and all that the license was that he had seen a doctor basically and was deemed to be in good enough physical shape to take part in a wrestling event. There was no like test to see if he was able to actually do the moves. It wasn't like a driver's license. Okay, you take your driver's license exam, you drive and you execute safe turns, and you show that you can do shoulder checks, and you maybe parallel park a little bit. You do all those sorts of things. You make sure that you're following the rules of the road. You stop at your crosswalks. You maintain a safe and steady speed. All those sorts of things are things that make sense, because they're steps that you have to take in order to be a licensed driver. In order to be a licensed professional wrestler, all that you have to do is pass a quick physical, and pay the state athletic commission a couple $100. It just seems like a barrier to these people to be able to make their livelihoods. And it just seems like a pointless cash grab. If it was something that actually they had to do, that you had to prove that you were going to be able to do things safely, the things that you wanted to do safely in order to get that license, okay, that's fine. But like, there's no universal test for this sort of thing, and it makes no sense to me. And that's my little ramble about that. After this, we're going to get into the WrestleMania card as it stands right now. I'm going to give you my quick, uninformed, uneducated predictions as to what's actually going to go down on the WrestleMania card. And that'll be that for professional wrestling. Like I said, it's a professional wrestling heavy week. Okay, guys, I apologize. It is what it is. We're gonna get into this. I'm gonna make it as quick and painless as I possibly can, and we'll get into some other stuff to close out the rest of the show. So WrestleMania 34 comes to you this Sunday from the Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana. I'm sure that they're saying that it's sold out, but I'm sure you can still get tickets if you're looking to get into that event there. It's going to be a long card, as it usually is. I'm going to run through it based on what exists on Wikipedia as I'm recording this. So, of course, tonight is Monday, so you're still a Monday Night Raw and a Tuesday night SmackDown Live to come. But this is probably what the show is going to sort of look like. And I'm going to run through the card really quickly, give you my idea of how things are going to maybe shake out. On the show, and this is in no real particular order, it's just sort of the matches as they're listed on Wikipedia. We've got Daniel Bryan and Shane McMahon versus Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. If Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn win, they get rehired. They were, in storyline terms, fired last week after they beat down Shane McMahon the week before, and then they beat down